Thanks, Brooke. Want me to take it away here?
Go for it. Thanks.
All right. And I'll add one other logistical thing that I think works good for Zoom meetings is that if you have a question, raising your hand, there's the virtual way to raise your hand, which I'll do right now, which is under reactions. You can just put a virtual hand up. And if Brooke's kind of watching the screen, she can let me know, hey, Madeline has a question for you. And Madeline, do you want to say something? That way we're not just interjecting on top of each other. So also, if you're on screen and you just raise your hand physically, we'll see you too. So does that sound okay, Brooke?
Great.
Okay, cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Bret Pence. I am, my grand poobah title is Greater Minnesota Director for the organization Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. I'm also happen to be a one roof homeowner. I live in Duluth. We've been in our home 12 years now. This Christmas will be 13 years that we lived in this home in 106 Waverly Place in Duluth. And we're really dedicated to the land trust model. So I'm really delighted to be with you today. Part of what I do in my job is provide outreach and education on energy incentives, both to nonprofit organizations like churches and also to individuals. And so being a one roof homeowner, I knew this was a crowd that really should know, really should lean into and learn about all the new incentives that are coming our way. So that's what we'll be focused on today. I'll talk a little bit about my organization. We'll touch broadly on the big federal bill, the Inflation Reduction Act that passed in 2022 and how that's enabled a lot of this. We'll touch briefly on commercial incentives because that affects one roof somewhat, and Brooke and I have been working on some parts of that. So we'll just touch on that a little bit, and that can affect one roof homeowners somewhat. And then we'll really dive into the incentives that are coming, the energy incentives that are coming our way, and what I think you need to know and how you can kind of prepare for those. So, and Brooke's right. I think if you have questions at any time, just feel free to raise your hand or put something in the chat, and we're a small group, so no problem. So thanks for having me, and I will share my screen now so you can see my slides. And let's see. Okay, do you see that? Okay, so here we are at the beginning. This is just some boilerplate about who we are for my organization. Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light is a nonprofit. We work with the faith communities, all faith communities in Minnesota, really focused on environmental justice issues, in particular climate change. And so we try to bring the faith voice into the broad organizing around that issue within our state, at many different, at the policy level and the practical level and at the organizational level. We also try to bring that broad voice back into faith communities to tell them what's going on and how different communities could, put solar on their roofs, or how individuals in those congregations can take advantage of incentives, how they can be involved in policy discussions, how they can organize within their own faith communities. So it's a little bit about who we are. We've been active in northeastern Minnesota for, since 2013. So we're now just at 11 years. And we were the first region outside the Twin Cities to really be a member of this organization. That was prior to that time. Although it was a statewide organization, most of the activity was happening in the metro area. So I'm proud that we in Duluth and northeastern Minnesota in general have been helpful in making them a true statewide organization. So this is what we'll be what I'll be discussing with you today. Just kind of a breakdown. Again, IRA is not. We're not talking about retirement income at this point. We're not talking about Irish history. We're going to be talking about the Inflation Reduction Act and just what that's bringing to us in terms of incentives. But we'll also be talking about state incentives a little bit at the end, and also utility incentives, and just generally how you can kind of prepare for those and how you can kind of access them. So those are things that some of those are new and some of those are not, and how you can use all those together to try and stack those incentives. So let's dive in. I've already mentioned the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. It was signed, gosh, it's almost, we're talking a year and a half now. It was signed in August of 2022. The Inflation Reduction Act is not a title that really engenders a lot of awe or inspiration. You know, it's kind of a humdrum title to most people. It doesn't seem like that's something that people think would be meaningful in their lives. It's something that we get directly out of. But in reality, that act really had a long history. If you've heard of the Green New Deal, that was really the first inclination of this act. And then it went through other iterations, climate, and not just climate action, but the necessity of within climate action for people to actually be able to afford to take their own actions to see benefit in their own lives. That's what the Green New Deal was about, was making sure everyone could participate in a necessary energy transition. So we have can address climate change and no one gets left behind in that process. That was carried over in the 2020 election. That was carried over into the title Build Back Better. And then there was a IIJ, you might have heard of it as an infrastructure law. So all of that this concept was carried forward, but this bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, was really the first one to really hone in on this idea of, okay, we need to change what we're doing particularly in terms of energy to address climate change, but we can't make this so it's unaffordable for people to participate in that transition. People have to be centered in that. We can't leave people behind. So there's a lot of spending in it. A lot of it is with incentives. All the modeling shows that it should reduce emissions by 40% by 2030. That's a long way to what science tells us we need to do. You know, the best science says 50 or maybe a little over that. So it's finally a bill. It's the first real bill in the United States that is trying to take on climate change at scale and trying to bring people in. And it is, I should say, it's a compromise bill. You know, as I noted at the end, there are other portions of the bill that sometimes look like they're more incentives for the fossil fuel industry or something like that. And there are some questionable things in there, but there's a lot for people to realize this energy transition to help them benefit. And we'll kind of talk about what that transition is. And the grand theory of action behind this bill is that, okay, really to address climate change and the effects of that going on around the world, and here we can all feel here at home, whether it's wildfires or the fact that it's probably going to be 50 degrees in a few days and that we have hardly any snow this year, is that we need to clean up electricity. And we have the technology to do that now, and it's really cheap, by the way. It's actually the cheapest form of electricity, whether it's wind, solar, storage, other things. So there's incentives to clean up electricity. And then there are incentives to electrify everything. And once you have clean electricity, think about all the things we use around the home that maybe don't use electricity. Here are some pictures from my own house, but you can see a car, that box on the wall is a water heater. There's a furnace, there's a washer dryer. A lot of that is using natural gas or petroleum, and you can electrify that stuff now. And actually it's relatively inexpensive to do that on a relative scale. That doesn't mean homes aren't challenged by that cost, but the technology is there and the cost is there. We just need to help people do it. So that's the centering equity part. The third leg is that no one should get left behind in this, and it won't make any sense for this theory of action if lots of people can't take part in it. You know, we need everyone to be able to take part. And for lots of people, that means they're going to need help, assistance in terms of incentives to make these transitions, to move your gas furnace to like a heat pump. And we'll talk about heat pumps here. Heat pump, there's a diagram of heat pump right there. It's an interesting, we'll go to the next slide here. I'm going to put a little book stop at heat pumps, and we'll just revisit that in a little bit, because that may not be a term that you've heard before. But again, here, before we do that, in the grand scheme of things, one of the questions you get is, well, if we're going to turn all this stuff into electricity, like our gas homes and our cars and run that on electricity, aren't we going to need more electricity? Yes, we are. But the kind of electrification we're talking about is really efficient. And right now we're already in an economy. This spaghetti kind of diagram is amazing because it's showing in Minnesota in 2018 on the left, all all the places where we got energy, and on the right where it went at the end. And if you look on the right, in the gray, there's a place called rejected energy. That's all the waste. That's pollution. That's all the waste. So of all their energy we're using, we're only to actually use a service for to drive a car around or to heat your home. The rest of that is just pollution. And so when we turn a gas furnace, for instance, into an air source heat pump that can heat your home, the energy part of that just gets really, really efficient. You're just not putting much pollution out into the atmosphere. And those tend to be 4 times more efficient often than your natural gas furnace. So 400% more efficient. So pretty amazing stuff can happen. Yes, we'll need more electricity, but in general, we'll be a lot more efficient as a country. So that's the general idea. And this electrification can take place everywhere. These are just some of the places in your home where there are opportunities to electrify, whether that's a water heater or a clothes dryer or your car or how you cook. There are incentives for all of this stuff. And so that's what I want to make sure you know about these incentives, that they're coming your way. So again, this is part of the incentive structure we'll just talk about today. I'll highlight the federal incentives, but then we'll talk through some of the state and the utility incentives that can interact with that. Many of the things that I'll talk about today are tax incentives. Some of those are tax credits, and then there are rebates. I'm not going to talk about loans and community grants so much right now in this particular talk, because what you could actually directly take part in are more the rebates and the credits. So just want to highlight that. And also just tell you the difference between a tax credit and a rebate. So there are many kinds of tax incentives out there. Mostly we'll be talking about tax credits, either at an organizational level or an individual level. And what a tax credit is, it just means that if you are paying tax to the federal government, if they're giving you a credit, that means you're clawing back basically some of that money that you formerly owed the federal government and now is coming directly back to you as a tax credit. So when we talk about a tax credit, we call it a dollar for dollar basis. That means $1 in tax credit equals $1 that you're getting back from that money you were going to pay the feds and within the IRS filing. The problem with the tax credit, as some of you probably can already point out, is you have to have a lot of stuff that you're owing the federal government. So if you're really wealthy and you owe the government a lot of money on your taxes, you have the appetite, for a lot of credits. You can use credits and no problem. If you are an individual that does not have a high income and hence you do not owe the federal government a lot, tax credits are of limited use to you because you can't use that. You can't claw back what you're paying to the federal government because you're not paying it. You may not be paying that much, or anything at all in some cases. So tax credits, they can be really useful for folks, but they have that problem, that equity problem, that if you are a lower income individual and you're not paying the feds much, it's really of limited use. And that's where these rebates do not operate like that. A rebate is something that is coming back to you from a purchase. And you're probably familiar with rebates already. You've had rebates where you may have used them at Menards or something like that. We're just getting something upfront at the point of sale, at the register. That's the idea of a rebate, that everyone can participate in that, and you're getting that without having to go through a filing with the IRS or clawing back something. So rebates are something we really wanted to see in the Inflation Reduction Act to make sure everyone could participate. They got in there, and we'll be spending some time talking about how you can access them, what they are and how you can access them. Okay, a little bit on the commercial side. So these are not, there are tax credits within the IRA for commercial entities. And in the past, I'm going to just talk about this for a little bit. This is not for individuals, just this is on the nonprofit side. But I thought this is something you should know about. In the past, commercial entities could get a tax credit for solar. They could file, as I talked about tax credits just a minute ago, they could take that out of their tax filings for the next year. And we saw a lot of solar move that way. It did not help nonprofits very much, because if you're a nonprofit like One Roof, or like a lot of the communities I work with, like a church, for instance, you're not paying tax. As a nonprofit, you don't pay tax to the federal government. So something like solar was just more expensive for you. You didn't get the main incentive, that 30%, and the main incentive was 30% back as a tax credit on solar. What the Inflation Reduction Act did is it basically made it so that nonprofits can now take advantage of that tax credit. Even if they're not paying taxes, they basically get it back as a type of rebate. It's called direct pay. It's a little more complex than a normal rebate, as Brooke and I have been, working together to try and figure out how One Roof could take advantage of that. But in practice, it's similar to it. Basically, you file some records with IRS. They say, yes, you are a nonprofit. Yes, you did something that qualifies as clean energy within our structure. And now we're going to give you that 30% back. Let's say you put $100,000 solar array on top of One Roof, and the federal government agrees with your filings, and they're going to send you $30,000, when you file your taxes, kind of modified taxes with the IRS. That is a huge deal. This is another diagram of how direct pay works. On the left here, what it's showing is, before there was direct pay, we tried to help nonprofits. When I say we, lots of people in the environmental community around the country tried to figure out how we could get around these things, because the nonprofits didn't have any capacity to take on the main benefits. And so we tried to get them into private companies, and they would take some portion and give you some benefit back, but it was really messy, and lawyers really loved it because it was really complex. And now we just have this direct pay program, which we're kind of still building on the fly. We're still learning how to do it, but it simplifies everything a lot, and it should really help nonprofits realize these tax credit structures that they couldn't take advantage of before. And for things like solar, not only is that 30% base credit there, but now they've added these additional kind of credits you can add on. If you're in an energy community, that's a place where maybe you've lost a coal plant, or a coal mine shut down, you can get another 10% just by living in that area. Grand Rapids and Grand Marais are two places where are listed as energy communities in Minnesota, because they've had coal plants shut down recently. Domestic content is using American-made stuff. So American-made solar panels, or American-made steel, American steel within the racking system. Low-income community is a community within that is defined as a low-income community by certain metrics, but basically a place of poverty within the United States, within a census tract of the United States, meeting certain definitions. So you can see, you can stack these up, and what was 30% at one time could be as much as 50, 60, even 70% off. So it's really something we're working hard to understand. I've helped a couple of churches get solar in the past year, and they're going through this process now. And this is something that Brooke can maybe talk to you more about it in the question time afterwards. But this is something where One Roof is starting to get interested. Like, how do we as a nonprofit start to realize these savings, through our work? So I think that's really, really exciting. And One Roof has been really a national leader in trying to figure this out. So really appreciate their work. Okay, now let's move into the individual side and kind of the meat of this, what maybe is most applicable to you. So we talked about tax credits, and that's what we're going to focus on right now. And these are federal tax credits. And there is that one tax credit for individuals for solar. Now, we talked about the commercial benefits just previously. There are also individual tax credits for solar, also for batteries, For wind, not many people have wind at their house. It's not practical often in an urban environment. But if you're more in a rural location, that could be applicable. And the acronym GSHP is a heat pump, but that's a ground source heat pump. And we'll talk about heat pumps a little more in just a minute. But these are all things that can be, if you're an individual household can take advantage of that. It's 30% back in terms of tax credit. There's no cap on that. Sometimes with tax credits, they have a cap up to $2,000 or something. If your solar array costs $25,000, you get 30% back on that. And turnkey means it's everything that is necessary to make that happen. So when the installer says, I'm bringing in an electrician to do this work, we're going to have to do this rewiring. We may have to do some reinforcement on your roof. Maybe your roof comes back with a report from the solar installer that it needs some reinforcement before you install the panels. That can qualify. So it's really a very inclusive list of what you can include on that tax credit. So that's really great. The other thing that is, and that was in place before, but it wasn't, maybe it wasn't that generous. And also it didn't include these other technologies like batteries. So now you can get a battery with that solar, include it in the 30%. And and make sure when the grid goes off, you have some backup at your own house, which is great. The other credit, which is it's mostly brand new, is called 25C, and that is an energy efficiency rebate or electrification. So this is there was an there was an efficiency rebate previously. So if you got some new windows, you got some doors, you could get a little amount back. I think it was up to $600 in a tax credit, but it was limited to how much you could use it on, and it was capped at $600 in the course of your lifetime. So it wasn't that useful. You could burn through that just by replacing a few windows. You could have used that whole credit up, and I know I did it at my own house here, at my own one roof house. Replacing a few doors, I used up that energy efficiency credit, 10 years ago. They've changed that so it revolves on a yearly basis. So you can use it year after year. It rolls over. They've upped the amount to $2,000 or even $3,200 per year, depending on what you're doing. And then there are caps of that. Those kind of caps of how much you can do has expanded, and what you can do has expanded. And this is just some information about how that energy efficiency tax, what you can use it for. And you can see it's just a lot of things. Yes, it's we're talking about you're replacing your gas furnace. If you get an efficient enough model, that can be covered in this. Even getting an energy audit, we'll talk about. You can get that part as part of a tax credit. You can insulation, windows, doors. So we know in Duluth we have an older housing stock. We know we need a lot of new doors, lots of insulation. Almost all of us can improve our homes in that way, and that's included within this tax credit, as well as stuff like heat pumps. And then there's the rebates. You know what? I've been going through this time. I keep putting off what a heat pump is. And I think before I touch on the rebates, I better go back and talk about a heat pump. I'm going to go back to this diagram over here, because I've mentioned it many, many times now. It's really central in the electrification part of these rebates. And so I think I'm going to talk about that don't mind just a little dovetail before we go back into incentives. But I think a lot of people, one danger in doing this is you could use a lot of terms that sometimes you assume everyone knows. And I think heat pump is one of those important things I think people should know about, but I don't think has really got out there much. A heat pump is something that just moves heat from one place to another. So it's not burning something to create heat. It's moving heat from one place to another. If that sounds strange to you, you all have a heat pump in your home, at least working just in one direction, and that's called a refrigerator. A refrigerator moves heat from outside of your refrigerator into the air outside of, into the airspace outside of the refrigerator. Yes, it's cool inside your refrigerator, but if you put your hand on the back, it's warm. That's a heat pump. It's just moving heat. We don't think of it this way. We think it's just cooling things down, like we're putting a bunch of ice in it, but it's actually sucking heat out of that space and moving it elsewhere into our homes. So heat pumps technology, that kind of heat pump technology has been around for a long time. What we would call maybe a true heat pump would be something that can move heat from one place to another and in both directions, either pushing heat outside or bringing heat inside. And that is a lot of what's going on. The technology has changed in such a way that heat pumps are now a practical solution to heating, even in a Minnesota winter, even in a regular Minnesota winter, which we're not having this year, but even in a real Minnesota winter, moving heat from outside, if you can believe this, at 5 below, into your own home and heating your home with that. It would be simple to say it's done through magic, and it feels like that, but it's really science. It's just they're using liquids that they compress over time. Again, an air conditioner is a heat pump. It's just it's a one-way heat pump, moving heat outside from inside your home outside. But if you have an air conditioner, there's a compressor unit that's outside that compresses a fluid. It moves heat by compressing a fluid, one way or the other, and then releasing heat from that fluid. That's essentially what they do in both directions with an air source heat pump, that the same thing you do with the air conditioner. So there's this condensing unit on the outside of the house that allows this to happen. So it's just simply the science has progressed to the point where, yes, there is heat. It's not absolute zero outside at 5 below. There is still some heat you can grab with the right kind of fluid. You can compress that fluid and release it as heat inside your house. When you're moving heat like that from one place to another, because you're not burning it, it's very, very efficient. It just costs you the energy to move it from one place to another, not to create it or burn something. So air source heat pumps can be, they have a coefficient of performance, which is their metric for efficiency. It kind of breaks efficiency in the way, because if a air source heat pump has a COP of 3.0, like at 40 degrees, that means for every unit of electricity they put into it, you get 3 units of heat out of it. And the way that converts to efficiency is that's 300% efficient. The best gas furnace you can get is, maybe 97%, 98% efficient. We understand that. It almost breaks my mind to think about something that's 300% efficient. But you're just moving heat from one place to another. So this is a central technology in electrification. It allows for extremely efficient heating of buildings, heating water. You can use heat pumps within a clothes dryer and make that really efficient, as opposed to an electric dryer. So thanks for my little aside on heat pumps, my little public education session there. But this is one of the key technologies that the tax credits that we referred to earlier, I'll go back to that. Again, here are these federal tax credits, and you can see tax credits for heat pumps. You can see tax credits for heat pump water heaters. So heat pumps can be used to space heat your home. They can be used to heat your water system. You can have geothermal heat pumps that, instead of pulling it out of the air, as that diagram just showed, you're pulling heat out of the ground. They're more expensive, but even more efficient and better in certain situations. So it is a key technology that we're looking at. It's great to have them all in all the tax credits, but one of the arguments was, well, if you're going to have all these this new technology, how are regular people going to be able to afford that? And the way they do that is through rebates. So
Can I interject with a question?
please, yeah.
Brett? So Madeline is asking in the chat, why is the updated tax credit for a heat pump available per year?
Right. Right.
Isn't
Well,
it? Yeah.
that's a great question, because and that goes back to what I thought was a limitation of the efficiency tax credit that existed previously, which gave you a lifetime benefit, right? Here you could get a heat pump here. This is, I keep pointing to it, but I should use my cursor. Here's a heat pump that would, this is referring to the kind of heat pump that would heat the air inside your home. So an air source heat pump, maybe. Here you could get 30% of cost, up to $2,000 per year. So great. Let's say you get an air source heat pump, in your home 1 year, and it cost you, $8,000. Easily 30% of that's $2,000, so you could take the maximum benefit. The next year, you're not getting it. You don't need to do that again, but the next year, hey, you know what? That works so well. Maybe you're going to get a heat pump water heater, replace your old gas water heater. Look, now you can get another rebate. That basically you start over on a blank slate, and the next year you can say, okay, this year I'm going to put in a water heater. I'll get the water heater cost me $5,000. Is 30% of that 2,000? I think it is. I think you're probably still close to that range. So you might not get all of that, but whatever 30% of 5,000 is, you can use that up. So it revolves on a year to year. Now, if you're worried about someone taking that every year, you know what? If they have let's say they have a detached home in the backyard that grandma's living in, and the next year they want to put in their air source heat pump, yes, they can use that again. So I hope that answers that question, that you can use these on a revolving basis. The idea is not to block people from trying to take advantage of these credits. It's try to incentivize them to think, oh, I could do this with it. I could do that with it. Realizing that people need incentives to try to move to these technologies. Hope that answers the question there, Madeline.
Yeah, it does.
So now let's move on to the rebates. And again, remember, rebates are not tax credits. These are things that you should be able to get at the point of sale, right? These are enabled by the same federal legislation. They are a little different in that you're not filing this on your taxes. You're not telling the IRS you've done this. These are a rebate that was granted on a state-to-state basis. And so we had a rebate that was money to administer that was given to the state of Minnesota. So our state Department of Commerce is the one who will be administering this federal rebate. And so as we talk right now, this rebate is not yet available. I'm told it will be available either in late 2024, early 2025. We're hoping to see it actually in the third quarter of 2024 is what we're going to be pushing for. Those of us inside, talking to our legislators and talking to the Department of Commerce, that's where we'd like to see it. So that's what I'm trying to get people to kind of focus on when they should have everything ready by. That would be, third quarter would be kind of August, September, October, somewhere in there. Even July, August, September. I'm hoping they'll be available at that time. I'll show you how to keep track of that later. To qualify for these, not just anyone can qualify for them. You do have to be income qualified. And so this is very similar to a one roof home. If you make too much money, you can't buy into a one roof home. You have to income qualify to get into a one roof home. The same thing. So they are for low to moderate income folks. And that is based on a metric they have. And I can show you we'll show you a little later how you can figure out what that is. But it's quite generous. So if you're a moderate income person in Duluth, the top of that's, if you're a family of four, the top of that scale would be about $135,000 a year of household income. That's a lot of people would qualify for that. If you're low income, would start at that same family. If it's under, I think 75 or 80, I think it's around $75,000 is where you fall into a low income. So if you're a moderate income, you can get 50% off up to a certain cap for many things like an air source heat pump. If you're low income, so if you're under that 75,000 for a family of four in Duluth, you could get 100% off, at the point of sale, which is exactly the thing we've been arguing for a long time, is that if you want low income people to actually make these changes, you have to let them make it easy for them to do it. So it's great to see this actually got in the bill. The HOMES acronym at the bottom is another rebate. If you're doing a kind of a retrofit, a full energy retrofit on a home, it gives you some money back on that as a rebate. That's usually those are really large projects. So if you're doing a retrofit all at once. This other one called HERA is for if you're replacing an appliance here or some insulation there. I think that's a more reasonable place for where a lot of us live. So I'm going to focus on that. And here are just some of the caps on the program here. I want to pull your attention again, since we talked about heat pumps. here's heat pump cooling, heating. This is for air source heat pumps or the air source heat pumps. So this is using outside air to heat the space in your home. Look at the cap on that, $8,000. So that family of four, let's think about that family of four in Duluth. They're making under 75,000 a year. They probably don't have money to put into an air source heat pump, even if they get a tax credit or anything like that. It's just probably not a possibility for them. They've got 2 kids, they're trying to make things work. This would be $8,000 at the point of sale for this. That would cover, for many types of heat pumps, that would cover the full cost. So it's a pretty amazing rebate that's coming our way. If you're moderate income, it would pay 50% of that. So up to $4,000. Actually, it could go all the way to this $8,000 mark if you had a more expensive heat pump. And we'll show you an example of that later. So it's 50% of the cost of the system. So even that moderate income person could get $8,000 back at point of sale if it's a more expensive system. And look at all the different things that I think you'll agree with me could be useful to a lot of us. Insulation, water heater replacement, clothes dryer replacement. If you got a home with old wiring in it, if you've got a home with electric load service, is your breaker box. If your breaker box is an older box, if you've got an old cooking range, so these are practical things I think everyone can immediately grab onto and say, oh yeah, that's something I could probably use. So think about your own home. Okay. And then we also have other incentives that are coming our way. And the reason I'm bringing them up is because you can use these incentives with these rebates, with these tax credits, to create even more incentive for yourself. We call them stacking, meaning I'm going to take the federal tax credit. I'm also going to take a federal rebate, and I'm going to see if the utility and the state have something for me. And that $4,000 rebate I was getting from the feds is now, like $10,000 worth of assistance to myself. And that's what I want to see people understand that they might have access to. There is a state grant. We're talking heat pumps. There's a state, many of these programs, I'll back up. For the state of Minnesota, for those incentives, many of these programs are brand new. They're just getting off the ground. And like that rebate, they're not available at the moment for many of these things. So they're being stood up, as we speak. And I'll show you how you can kind of check on the progress of that. But one of the new grants coming forward is for air source heat pumps in people's homes. And it would add on another $4,000 to that incentive. You already saw that was very generous from the federal government. So with the help of that and the federal rebates, we all should be like paying attention to heat pumps at this point. But yeah, there are other incentives as well. Energy storage is maybe a battery in a home that someone is interested in. Even electric vehicles. I didn't talk about that, but there are federal kind of direct rebates on certain kinds of electric vehicles in the country right now. Even on used electric vehicles, there are point of sale rebates. So the state of Minnesota is adding to that. Even e-bikes. If you haven't ridden an e-bike, they're really fun. If they've been out of your price range, and I thought, well, that's just frivolous, not something that would be useful to me because it's not something I can afford. The state has a grant program for that coming out in July of this year, which is really exciting. So even stuff like that. So lots of coming from the state of Minnesota. Much of it is on top of or written into law to work with the federal incentives. So it's worth knowing about. And then, of course, we still have our utility programs, which is where we had in the past previously where a lot of the incentives were for this kind of stuff. So whether it be insulation or whether it be for replacing an appliance, many of the rebates that did exist in the past came from utilities. They exist because the state requires them to save a certain amount of energy per year. Thus, they have these rebate programs, and those are still available. And again, you can stack on top. So at this point, you're probably overloaded with information and thinking, how am I going to figure out what works for me? So at least on the federal side, there's a great calculator from an organization called Rewiring America. That's a nonprofit. And if you type in a Rewiring America IRA calculator, you'll come to this page. And you just type in your information as I've sort of done here for a hypothetical home in Duluth, and it will show you how many incentives, how much in incentives you qualify for from the federal side. And if we went down on this, if we went, if I were to scroll down on that screen, this is a screenshot, so I can't do it. But if you were to scroll down on this screen, it would show you each incentive, how much it was. You could click on it. It would give you detailed information about that. And you can explore what you qualify for. And the argument I'm making to folks, what I'm trying to let people know is this is the time. There's a lot of money coming, as I've tried to show you, for regular people finally coming our way to help with kind of making our homes more comfortable, making them lighter, making them a better place for us to live. And this is a way to sort of plan on how to take advantage of it. So this is a good time, even though some of these rebates, some of these state programs aren't in place yet, this is the perfect time to start planning for how these incentives, how you might qualify for them, and how you might use them in your own home. And I just wanted to show you an example. This is my lovely home, my one roof home, my little slice of heaven here in Duluth. And I did a little experiment on this this winter. I thought, you know what? I have a gas furnace that is going to need to be replaced fairly soon. Let's just get a bid. Let's figure it out. Let's get a bid from a contractor. Let's see what it would cost. And in my case, I said, if I'm going to replace my furnace, I just want to replace the whole thing with a heat pump. Now, if you have an existing furnace and it's in good shape, you could just put a heat pump on top of the furnace, sort of like a central air conditioning unit. You can heat with it to a certain, like say down to 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and then your furnace kicks on, and then you can cool with it in the summer. So you don't have to do a full replacement, but that's not what I was doing. I said, if I'm going to replace my furnace, let's see what the cost would be to totally rip out the gas. To not use gas at all. What would it take in this climate to do this? And it takes more if you have that's a higher cost than a standard heat pump. So you can see this higher cost reflects that. It might even be a little more than this, but this is close to the ballpark. So $16,000 maybe to do that, where the heat pump is taking care of all of my heating needs for the whole year and cooling. The IRA rebate we talked about, I live in a moderate income home, defined as such by the federal government. 50% of $16,000 is $8,000. Already the federal government has cut my cost in half at the point of sale if I'm able to use the rebate. Next, the state of Minnesota heat pump rebate grant program I talked about adds another $4,000 at the point of sale. Already, now I'm down to 3/4 of the cost. Now we're down from $16,000 to $4,000. And lo and behold, I still could qualify for utility rebate and a federal tax credit of what's left. So my end cost after all that is about $2,000. That's something my family can afford. We can't consider a $16,000 furnace replacement, but we could afford a $2,000 replacement. And by the way, that makes it very, very affordable. I actually have a good payback on that, meaning if you have a payback, that's a financial indication of how long it takes you to recoup the cost. At $2,000, I can recoup that cost in 15 years. That is less than the lifetime of the heat pump, which means it makes kind of financial sense too. I'm sort of making money at that point. This incentive stacking is going to be really important, I think, for a lot of folks. If this was a heat pump that you're not concerned about using it all the year, maybe just cooling in the summer and that's using it in the spring and the fall and a little bit of the winter, these costs are going to be a lot less. So I just wanted to show what this incentive stacking could do for you, could do for all of us, but we have to kind of invest in researching what in our homes need to be replaced and what incentives we qualify for. And I think the next question is, well, how do you start with that? It's really complex. And you're like, yeah, it is, but it's not. Your home, you start with your home and you start with you. and you start with a checkup on your home, and we call those checkups for homes energy audits. We have excellent energy audits available here in Duluth. If you income qualify, they're free of charge. If you don't income qualify, they're heavily rebated already by our utilities. So they would cost you about $100, $150 typically in Duluth for after rebates, existing rebates for audits. And guess what? Now you get a tax credit on that too. So effectively, they can be very, very inexpensive to get an energy audit. But the energy audit, just so you know, is a checkup for your home. It's just an auditor who is an expert, a certified expert on energy, comes into your home. If you ask for the advanced audit, which I recommend, they do a blower door test to figure out how leaky your home is, like how tight or leaky your home is, where those leaks are, and give you a plan of how to fix those, and then look at all the mechanical systems in your home and talk to you about safety issues that might be there, talk to you about how you're using energy and what might be your best, gives you sort of a place to plan based on all those factors. Like, okay, you know, if you're looking to spend your money, it might be wise to replace your furnace first, because you know what? Looks like it's 15 years old. We don't see many furnaces of this type lasting beyond that. Might be a place you want to start. So it helps you to, just like that checkup to the doctor, that annual physical, maybe they're picking up something there that's wrong with you, but maybe not. And maybe it's just something like me, you know, you really should lose a little weight, you know? All right, well, let's develop a plan for how to figure out to do that over time and how that can benefit you. Equilibrium 3, that's their acronym, kind of shortened it, sorry. Eco 3, I call them, but Equilibrium 3 is a nonprofit in town. They do energy audits. They've done them for 10 years. I used to work for them. I trust them highly. So that's a great place to get an energy audit, and I put that down there. There are other auditors in town. If you go under Minnesota Power and put in energy audit, there's a number of different contractors, just like Eco 3, that are qualified by the utility to do an energy audit and get a rebate from them. So they're not the only one, but I'm going to highlight them. And then, so I'm going to wrap up here. I hope I've convinced you that this is something that you should be interested in for your benefit. And these are just some resources to help you get ready beyond that energy audit, which I think is the kind of a critical first step for your home. I mentioned that calculator. I think that is one of the best places. It also helps a lot with the metrics for how you qualify, called area median income, in terms of that low to moderate income range for rebate, the federal rebates. That can be complex to understand because it depends on household size and where you live and all that kind of stuff. The calculator makes that simple. You just plug in what you know and off you go. So I think that's a great place to start. I think we have a great agency in Minnesota called CERTS, Minnesota CERTS. They're the Clean Energy Resource Team. It's a state organization. They exist to demystify clean energy and explain it to the public. So they've got a fantastic website, and they exist to help answer your questions. So they're really great. And then our Minnesota Department of Commerce is where a lot of this is living, whether it be that federal rebate program I told you is coming. They're the ones who will be administering that, or all those state grants I was talking about. And that's the website where you can kind of continually check up on, you know, what are those grant programs? What state are they in? How can I apply for them? That's kind of the website where all that information lives. So I hope this has been helpful, and I hope I've convinced you at least that this is something to take notice of. No matter how interested you are in a heat pump, well, I don't know, maybe you still have questions about that, but so many of us in Duluth just need more insulation in our homes, need to fix our windows, and now we have more resources to do a lot of those simple things too, beyond something like a heat pump. So I hope you'll tell your neighbors about it, and then I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, and really thank you for this time. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, thanks, Bret. So we have a few minutes if anyone does have any questions.
Looks like I'm looking at the chat here. There was one question in the chat, and it said, who do we contact when, if we qualify through Rewiring America? Do you do solar? Okay.
Yeah,
Can I just say something? It was a while ago, and I moved into a new house, one roof. It's very energy efficient. It's amazing. But someone told me a while back to look into Leave No One Behind, and I did my income, and I qualified for solar. But then I was like, how do I find the installers, and how does that all work? So I bet I would qualify in my new house, but my new house, it's great. Of course, I would love to have solar, but there's other people that are more behind probably than I am in energy efficiency that might need to be helped first. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we could talk about that, Kirsten, and brainstorm. I'm not familiar with the Leave No One Behind.
Yeah.
But we might just have, other resources as
I
well.
was wondering, is Leave No One Behind different than the
Yeah, do you know what that is, Brett? Leave No One Behind?
is
It's a
that
catchphrase. I don't know if there's,
Rewiring America? Is it the same thing?
I'm sorry, go ahead, say that again.
Is it the same as Rewiring America? Leave No One Behind?
It's
Or
not
no?
the same thing, although Rewired America uses that catchphrase a lot too. It's just it's more the concept or the idea that low income folks should be able to fully
Yeah,
participate in the energy transition. So I don't know if legislation's like actually attached to that. But Rewired America is sort of, you're not wrong in kind of pointing out that organization, because they're really dedicated to that idea of making sure everyone has access to it. So
Okay.
it doesn't mean one specific thing. I think it's more a concept of what, why people like, why our organization and Rewiring America really fought for those rebates, right? Like if you have a tax credit that has just limited help to people that don't pay taxes yet or don't have a lot of income, rebates are something that really helps with that. So I think that may be one place where you've heard it. So I think pointing out Rewiring America is really good. Brooke, should we talk a little bit about the low income, some of the work we've done with low income solar and with you in terms of.
Yes.
Yeah, so I wonder if this is another place and I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. What's your name?
Kirsten.
Kristen. Okay, Kristen. Yeah, when I'm saying my organization, MNIPL, another fantastic organization, Solar United Neighbors, has been working with Brooke at One Roof for the last couple of years to try to identify folks that are that qualify as low income, based on their annual income, and then try to we work to find incentives to fully cover their solar. We've done it on a small number of homes so far. I mean, you can imagine, an array can cost $15,000 to $25,000. So we try to find the resources to do that, so the low income person household doesn't have to do that, and then they have the lasting benefit of very reduced or free electricity for the life of the home. So it can be really, really impactful. So we've worked on that for a long time. If you, I don't think it's something you should be concerned about in terms of like if you're ahead of other people. We're just concerned about helping people to do that. So if you have interest in that, if you think your home could be a good place for that and you'd have interest, I would recommend just reaching out to Brooke to start with, and then we go from there. Brooke, do you have anything to add to that? Or?